The door swung open with a hard metallic clang, the kind that echoes long after it should have faded. Every head in the debrief room turned. Conversations froze mid-sentence. Pens stopped moving. Coffee cups hovered mid-air. And there she was, Captain Riley Hart, standing in the doorway, her face streaked with dirt, her uniform torn and covered in dust so thick it dulled the silver gleam of her nameplate. Her right hand trembled as she brushed grit from her sleeve, and when the light hit her dog tags, the entire room went still. The tags dangled from her neck, catching the fluorescent glare. Everyone recognized them, not just because they bore her name, but because 3 weeks ago, those same dog tags had been found at the site of an explosion in the valley. She was presumed dead. They'd already held the memorial. They'd already folded the flag. No one breathed. Not even the colonel. Riley's boots left a trail of dry, reddish dust across the tile as she stepped inside. Her voice was quiet when she spoke, so quiet that people leaned forward without meaning to. "Close the door," she said. And even though her tone was calm, it made the young lieutenant by the door fumble to obey. The air felt heavier after that. The projector hummed, showing a frozen satellite image on the screen. A smudged landscape that now looked eerily like the dust still clinging to Riley's clothes. The colonel stood slowly, his jaw tight. "Captain Hart," he managed. You're supposed to be dead," she finished, her lips twitching into a tired half-smile. "Yeah, I heard," someone exhaled shakily. Lieutenant Mason, her former second-in-command, looked like he'd seen a ghost, which in a way he had. "Ma'am, what the hell happened out there?" Riley didn't answer right away. She took off her cap, revealing a cut across her forehead, the kind that looked half-healed but fresh enough to sting. "That's a long story," she said, dropping into the nearest chair. "But before I start, someone get me some water. Please." No one moved for a few seconds. Then someone sprinted out, the door banging shut behind them. The rest waited, silent, as if one wrong word might shatter whatever spell had brought her back. When the water came, Riley took one sip, set it down, and began. "It started," she said, "on the 3rd day of the operation, the day the comms went down. Their unit had been tracking an insurgent convoy through the dry ridges outside Al-Sahira, a place that barely existed on any map. They were 6 clicks from base, in open terrain, when the first blast hit. It wasn't a direct strike," she said. "It hit the front Humvee. The dust blinded us for maybe 5 seconds. By the time I could see again, the entire ridge was collapsing." The satellite feed on the screen flickered as if trying to keep up with her words. She glanced at it but kept talking. "The ground split like it was alive." "Mason, you remember that canyon wall?" she asked, turning toward him. He nodded silently. "It wasn't a wall. It was a cover. The valley was hollow. A trap." The room shifted uneasily. Someone whispered, "That wasn't in the report." Riley laughed softly. "But there was no humor in it." "No, because I didn't live to write it." The explosion, she continued, had thrown her down into the canyon. Her radio shattered. Her shoulder was dislocated. The world above her burned orange with fire and falling rock. She could hear the screams of her squad for a few seconds, then nothing, just static. "I don't remember how long I was out," she said. "When I woke, it was dark. My watch was gone. My leg was pinned under part of the Humvee door. Took me half an hour to free it. I thought rescue would come. It didn't. For 3 days, she crawled through debris and wreckage, following faint signals from a cracked transmitter she'd salvaged. The nights were freezing. The days were worse. On the 4th day, she found movement. Not her team, not friendlies. Locals. Armed. Hostile. "They didn't kill me," Riley said flatly. "Guess I was worth more alive. They took me to a village west of the ridge. if you can call it a village. Half tents, half ruins. They kept me there, asked questions, wanted codes, wrote, names. She paused, looking down at her hands. The faint tremor in her fingers made one of the younger officers glance nervously at the colonel. I didn't give them anything, she said finally, but someone else did. The room stirred. Someone from our side? Mason asked. Riley didn't answer. Not yet. She leaned back, her eyes distant. They knew too much. About our supply lines, about drone schedules. Stuff no one outside command should have known. And when they realized I wouldn't talk, they stopped asking. They started moving, packing. I figured they were relocating. Her eyes met the colonel's. They weren't relocating, she said. They were waiting. For what? Someone asked. For extraction. A chill swept through the room. The colonel's face went pale. You're saying someone arranged a pickup for them? She nodded slowly. A helicopter. U.S. markings. Right on schedule. No one spoke for several seconds. Then Mason slammed his notebook shut. That's impossible. Yeah, Riley said. That's what I thought too, until I saw who stepped out of it. She looked around the room, her voice suddenly shaking with something between anger and disbelief. Major Ellison. Gasps broke the silence. Ellison, their intel officer, the man who'd briefed them before the mission, the one who'd filed the report confirming Riley's death. He walked out smiling, she said, staring at the table. Handed the leader a case. Then they shook hands like business partners. The colonel's knuckles turned white as he gripped the edge of the table. Do you have proof of this? Riley exhaled, slow and unsteady. Not much. I stole a comms drive from their truck before I escaped. It's encrypted, but it's here. She tapped the small, dust-caked flash drive hanging from her dog tags. Everything I risked staying alive for is in this. The colonel's gaze softened for a fraction of a second. You could have left it. You should have. I didn't come back for survival, Riley interrupted. I came back for the truth. Outside, thunder rumbled. Strange for the desert, but fitting somehow. The room felt like a storm brewing just beneath its ceiling. Mason stood abruptly. Where's Ellison now? Washington, the colonel said quietly. He was reassigned last week. Promotion. The word hung like poison in the air. Riley gave a dry laugh. Of course he was. Then the lights flickered. A hum of static filled the speakers on the wall, the same ones that usually played command alerts. This time, though, it was a voice. Distorted, metallic. Captain Hart, it said. You should have stayed dead. The lights cut out completely. The room plunged into darkness. The kind that makes your stomach twist because it's too sudden, too complete. Someone cursed under their breath. A chair scraped the floor. The hum of the air conditioner died, leaving only the ragged sound of breathing and the faint crackle from the speaker. Then came the voice again. Clear this time. You can't stop what's already in motion. Riley was on her feet before anyone else. Her hand went instinctively to her sidearm, only to find her holster empty. Of course, she'd turned in her weapon at the gate. Standard protocol for a presumed dead officer walking into HQ. She looked toward the window. Thick glass. Dark outside. Her eyes adjusted enough to see faint silhouettes around her. Mason by the wall, the colonel near the projector. Two officers whispering nervously by the door. Backup power will kick in soon, the colonel said, trying to sound calm. But his voice betrayed him. Don't wait for it, Riley said. Whoever that was, they're in our system. Cut the comms now. The colonel hesitated. If we lose connection. We already have, she snapped. Do it! Mason moved fast, pulling open the comms console near the table, ripping a few cables free. The static on the speakers went silent instantly. The lights flickered back on, powered by the emergency generator, throwing the room into a dim orange glow. Everyone looked shaken, except Riley. She looked focused, like she'd been waiting for this moment. "Colonel," she said, "we need to secure the server room. Ellison's fingerprints are all over this, and if he's feeding intel out of HQ—" "Hold on," Mason interrupted. "You think Ellison's got access to our network here?" Riley nodded. "He had the codes. He wrote half the encryption protocols himself. He's not working alone. There's someone inside keeping the line open." The colonel looked at her, eyes hard. "And how do we know it's not you, Captain? You've been gone 3 weeks. You show up out of nowhere with a story about betrayal and a flash drive we can't even read." Riley didn't flinch. "You think I blew up my own team?" He didn't answer. The silence was enough. Riley stepped closer, the dust still clinging to her boots, her face lit by the dim emergency glow. "You saw that feed, the coordinates, the op data. I wasn't supposed to survive, and whoever planned that knew exactly where we'd be. So ask yourself, Colonel, how would I know that, unless I'd been set up?" The colonel's jaw tightened, but his eyes flicked away for just a moment. That was enough. Riley could tell he was remembering something. A file, a report, a whisper in the briefing room weeks ago. Before he could reply, an alarm blared. A red light spun above the door. Mason turned to the terminal, squinting. "Security breach in the East Wing," he said. "Someone just accessed the servers remotely." "Then it's starting," Riley muttered. She grabbed her cap, pulled it low. "We have to move now." The colonel hesitated again, just long enough for the building to shake. A low, distant rumble that wasn't thunder this time. The emergency lights flickered again. Dust sifted from the ceiling vents. "That was the generator," Mason said, eyes wide. "It's offline. They're cutting power manually." Riley was already at the door. "They're not cutting power," she said. "They're erasing everything." The colonel's instincts kicked in. "All right," he barked. "Mason, Hart, you're with me. Everyone else secure the West Hall. Move." They raced through the dim corridors, boots echoing on the concrete floor. Riley's heartbeat pounded in her ears. Each corner they turned was another question, another ghost, waiting to jump out. When they reached the server room, the door was ajar and faint blue light spilled from inside. Riley motioned for silence and pressed her back against the wall. She peeked in and froze. A man in a black uniform stood over the console, typing rapidly. His face was hidden by a tactical mask, but the patch on his shoulder, an eagle insignia, wasn't standard issue. Riley's voice was barely a whisper. "He's one of Ellison's." Mason raised his rifle. "Orders?" Riley thought fast. If they fired, the drives could be destroyed. But if they waited, the man turned suddenly, as if he'd heard her thought. He reached for something on his belt, a detonator. Riley lunged. She hit him hard, the two crashing into the racks with a metallic clatter. Sparks burst as cables tore loose. Mason fired once, not at the man, but at the detonator, blowing it from his hand. The man howled, swung a fist that caught Riley across the jaw. She stumbled, but stayed up, grabbing the flash drive from around her neck and slamming it into the nearest port. "Download," she shouted. "Pull everything now." The system began to whir, screens flashing as data streamed from one drive to another. The masked man shoved her again, reaching for a knife. Mason tackled him, and the two went down hard, fists and elbows flying. Then a gunshot. Riley turned. Mason staggered back, blood on his arm. The man had pulled a sidearm from his boot. Without thinking, Riley grabbed the fallen detonator, slammed it against the console, and crushed it under her boot. The light on it blinked once, then died. The man froze. Riley stood, breathing hard. "You're done," she said. He looked at her, and though the mask hid his mouth, his eyes were smiling. "You have no idea," he said. Then he hit something on his wrist, and the screens all went black. Self-wipe, Mason gasped. Riley ripped the drive from the console just before the sparks flared again. Not all of it, she said. I got part of the transfer. The man lunged again, but this time the colonel fired. The shot echoed through the room, sharp and final. The man fell. For a long moment, no one moved. Just the hiss of burning wires and the distant echo of alarms. Mason slumped against the wall, clutching his wound. You think Ellison knew he'd fail? Riley stared at the dead man's wrist, at the faint red light still blinking beneath his glove. No, she said softly. He knew we'd trace it. The colonel frowned. Meaning? Meaning this was a message, she said. He wants us to know he's still watching. Outside, sirens wailed. Backup teams were arriving too late to stop the breach, but soon enough to see the damage. As medics took Mason away, Riley stood beside the colonel, staring at the charred racks of servers. Her reflection shimmered faintly in the glass. You think he's still in the country? The colonel asked quietly. She didn't answer at first. Then, he's closer than that. The colonel turned toward her. How close? Riley looked down at the flash drive in her hand. It was warm, too warm. The tiny indicator light on it was blinking steadily. He's listening right now. She dropped it onto the floor and stomped, crushing it under her boot. The light went out. The colonel's expression was unreadable. You just destroyed the only copy. Riley shook her head. No, I made two. He blinked. Where's the other one? Her lips curved into a faint, tired smile. Someplace he'll never think to look. He studied her for a long moment, then nodded. You'll brief Washington personally. Tomorrow morning, we'll reopen this case. Riley didn't respond. She just looked toward the window again, where the first light of dawn was breaking over the horizon, soft gold filtering through the dust, still clinging to her uniform. She should have felt relief, but all she felt was the weight of something unfinished. That night, she couldn't sleep. Every sound in the base felt louder than usual. A knock at her door made her jump. When she opened it, no one was there, only an envelope on the floor. Inside was a single photo. It was her, standing in the canyon 3 weeks ago, looking straight at the camera. On the back, written in neat black ink, were 5 words. See you soon, Captain Hart. Her hand tightened around the photo, heart hammering. The hallway light flickered, just once. And somewhere deep in the walls, she swore she heard that same distorted voice whisper again. You should have stayed dead. Riley didn't move, didn't speak. She just stood there, breathing in the silence, feeling the dust on her skin again, and knowing the war she'd escaped wasn't over. It had just changed battlefields. Sometimes survival isn't victory. Sometimes it's the beginning of something much darker. A reminder that truth doesn't always set you free. Sometimes it just makes you the next target.